Liked by the sound of violence.
Yeah, I think and I don't think fans or in the media realize the precautions the UFC and Bellator have taken. Especially, Bellator's doing a great job, but dude, what the UFC did, they were the first one. They were the Rosa Parks of this, pandemic.
Representing me again.
All right, we are back. That's right, everybody. I hope you got to hear Chris talk about how Brendan Schaub's representing him. It's a fucking great segue in. Oh, god damn it. Okay, so I finally stopped. I had to do a full fucking... Couldn't just do a restart on the network adapter on my computer. Had to do a full restart of everything. So, it's been a thing.
That's when you get the clip from Leon the Professional.
Yeah.
And he's like, everyone.
Oh, 100%. Well, and not just that. I feel like I 100% curse myself by shit talking Brendan Schaub that much. I feel like I brought that upon myself. Whatever YouTube internet gods that clearly bless him clearly don't bless us, and I clearly spurned their love. Yeah. I mean, dude, oh my god, I'm not gonna even bring it back up, but all I'm saying is one of the worst episodes I've ever heard. So now that we are back, Chris, we are gonna get into our can't miss episodes as well as some new shows and also rans or honorable mentions. So Chris, do you have any can't miss episodes aside from the one that I'm gonna bring up?
I have the new one you told me to listen to.
Okay, well, we'll get to that one when I get to new shows. So actually, why don't you segue us right into my can't miss? Heavy Hands episode 332.
Yeah, this one was good. They recapped Alexander Rakic versus Anthony Smith.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I don't have too many notes for this because I was mostly listening while doing another thing.
I guess my big note on it is this is the part 2 kind of episode for. Back in the day, there was a big discussion episode that I believe we actually had it as a catcher or can't miss. Back the first one was Pat Wyman and Connor Rebush, back when Dr. Pat Wyman was on the show. They had this big long discussion about different styles and kind of how they work in the sport. And so Phil Mckenzie was on, of course, as the new host. Well, I say new, it's been fucking years now. But Dr. Phil Mckenzie of Tekken fame he was on essentially to have another like a part 2 kind of style discussion with Connor, in that Phil has always had a pretty different kind of style of I was gonna say style of styles, but like a different breakdown of styles than Connor's, like boxer puncher, pressure boxer, like pressure fighter, counter fighter, like pretty straightforward like boxing kind of style that he likes to frame things around. I mean, of course, there's different dynamics on top of that, and he goes into it in the episode. But I just loved how, as opposed to like the first time around, which Connor even referenced this in the episode, it was very much like Pat Wyman and Connor Rebush both coming to it from a very similar place of kind of interpreting fights and watching fights, and then kind of marrying different fighters and fight styles together. Whereas Phil came at it with his totally own style of kind of perceiving style matchups and just fighter styles in general. And so it was interesting to hear kind of Phil and Connor bounce that back and forth, which is one of the things I found coolest about this episode.
I agree, and I'm glad they mentioned a lot of what kind of Pat brought to that as well, as far as how he thought how styles mesh and how their analyses play a factor into, I guess, what just really the fuck am I trying to say? Well, I guess when you're trying to address stylistic matchups whether it's two of the same style matchups, right, or like two polar opposites. How I don't know what I'm trying to say.
No,
I know
I get what
a
you're
lot
saying.
of them offset each other because it makes me go into boxing mode when I think of that too.
Yep. Well, and it's like it also they did a really good job of like juxtaposing different
Yeah.
forms within the same style, right? Like
Yes,
two
yes.
people that had the same style on paper, like if you were to say they're both pressure counter fighters or they're both boxer punchers, that kind of thing, but they go about it two very different ways, and that was kind of the interesting ways that I saw in this, especially like Phil's bringing the idea of like psychological groups like fighters, competitors, innovators, and lionhearts as like those being kind of like archetypes. I thought that was really interesting, and then pairing that with like discussions around the idea of like counter fighters, like those are discussions that like you don't necessarily hear a lot of, but like I always find it the most interesting because fight styles a lot of times are a reflection of the person's personality, you know.
Yeah, and I like how they discussed the Lionhearts, the pressure fighters, the counter strikers, and the
I think it was fighters, competitors, innovators, and lionhearts were Phil's categories. Yeah,
and I like how they discuss how pressure fighters in general do terrible against other pressure fighters because they're not used to that pressure themselves. And I remember that reminds me of fighters with one punch knockout power, right? And no offense to Tyron Woodley, he was a great champion, and I don't. As of recent, he hasn't done well against pressure fighters because if he's backed up against the fence, he doesn't really have that room to throw his overhand, right? So, well, if he's pressured, then it's like, okay, does he have to resort in his brain to I have to shoot on them now, or do I have to defend against takedown? Well, what's going on, right?
Well, exactly. And since his game is so counter focused that like it kind of shuts down his options, where he has so much input coming at him, it's hard to figure out what's counter, right?
Just like Justin Gaethje, right, in my opinion, is more of a pressure volume output fighter. But when he fought against Tony Ferguson, who is a volume output fighter, he totally changed that style entirely into counter striking, a la just I'm not gonna say a la Conor McGregor, but Conor McGregor, in my opinion, is still one of the best counter strikers as far as how he puts it, like as far as how he adjusts his game, because McGregor starts out volume first going forward, right, and that long karate stance.
I think it's not the worst comparison though, because like they both,
you know what I'm saying though, like
they both functionally use pressuring to counter. Like their entire game is based upon, hey, I'm going to stand exactly out of range so where I know you can't touch me, and I'm just going to slightly slip and rip you the fuck as hard as I can.
That's why I'll say, regardless, like say Gaethje does beat Khabib, right? You will see Gaethje fight Conor after that, and I'm still down.
Yeah, because I'll leave.
Well, and honestly, because Gaethje and Conor are so much similar. They're similar in a lot of different ways that people don't realize on the feet. Granted, are you going to see Gaethje
one of them's fought
wrestle? Right? Probably not. And yeah, one of them's fought recently. So, that's what's fun about that whole lightweight division as far as how styles mesh and collide. And then you get, I remember someone mentioned on Reddit, you get Khabib, right? They're like, okay, how's he going to deal with Gaethje's defensive wrestling? And then someone said, well, don't tell anyone else that Khabib also uses very good jiu-jitsu in an unorthodox fashion, in a sense that he's not doing strictly traditional jiu-jitsu, right? And aging our jiu-jitsu, they're like, that'll offend them. But the guy wasn't wrong. I mean, if you look at what Khabib does to neutralize other grappling,
these cross-side wrist rides and shit have like changed the sport.
Like Khabib naturally has great jiu-jitsu just based on how his grappling game is kind of just tailored. Really, it's just how he's able to kind of just negate and kind of really nullify all these different angles. Like, okay, well, this guy's getting me from this side, and it's funny because who was the last person to try to take him down? Like, not Abel Trujillo. Who was it? It was Gleison Tebow, right? Or
well, Tebow, actually was pretty successful overall in that fight. That was a wild fight. That was a
but
long
you know what I'm
time
saying?
ago,
That's why I'm so jazzed about Gaethje and Khabib.
Or be fun,
And yeah, as far as those matchups, and by the way, I wish we could have gotten Tony and Dustin. Apparently, Dustin couldn't see eye to eye with Dana.
No, the UFC won't fucking pay what he's worth. Let's be very clear.
I was going to say, to be fair, I was getting to this, aka the UFC's lowballing.
Yeah, no, they're a bunch of fuckboys who are trying to save money.
I should have led with that first.
Yeah, 100%.
I
Don't never say it's the fighter's fault when it's
and I'm
when
not.
it's contract negotiation.
I know it's the UFC's fault.
Yeah,
I know it's
It's a combination of the UFC and his management, which arguably are on the same team, depending on who his management is. I know on Gaethje's side they sure are. Oh my god! Also, did you see Gaethje speaking at a fucking Trump dinner?
That's
all I'm gonna say on that. We'll keep on moving. But good god, that makes
do you follow that page as shopped as it gets?
Yeah. I don't know if I don't know if I do, but
I'll send you the post. Basically, it showed the formal who's speaking. It's Gaethje.
It's Gaethje, Cejudo, Covington, and
Covington.
Yeah.
Someone else.
Dana.
And it shows it's the picture of the chick where she's like, no, like when Trump wins the election, and it's just like, oh boy.
Yeah, it's not the best look. But then again, what is the UFC doing the best look? The other thing that I thought was really cool, speaking of like fighter comparisons within the same style, one of the ones I thought was really interesting is they talk about like comparisons of the difference in pressure fighters between like a Bryce Mitchell and a Habib, which I thought was like a very I don't know it. I've never heard anyone make those comparisons in pressure fighting games. And that, like, I believe, if I remember right, I hope I'm not misquoting. I absolutely recommend going and listening to it, obviously, since it can't miss an episode for us. But I believe their argument was, like, Bryce Mitchell does a lot more of, like, giving you an out that he wants you to take because it sets up something else, whereas Habib does a lot more of, like, just using pressure and making you fight out of positions and then just always having an answer. Whereas, like, Bryce will give you an answer and then capitalize on top of that. Whereas Habib's just like, I'm just going to give you no answers, and every answer you try and throw at me, I'm just going to have a better answer for. So, that was interesting. And then, of course, at the end, anytime you get Phil Mckenzie talking about Tekken and MMA comparisons, I'm fucking here for it. It's my shit. It's the best. Phil doesn't... I get why Phil doesn't like talk more about the competitive fighting game scene that he is been in forever and comparisons in the sport, but like it's a real ass thing. It's always been a real ass thing. Like fighting games are made by a lot of martial artists generally, and we're around martial arts, and like dude, stuff like spacing and timing works no matter what it is. Whether it's fucking high level like team sports or individual competitive sports or fucking fighting games. Timing and spacing is a real ass thing in all this. So I don't know, just a great episode.
By the way, also speaking of that shit stain event is unfortunately great and legendary boxer Roy Jones Jr.
Well, to be fair, he
Damn
also. Oh, you mean friend of Putin, Roy Jones Jr. That's a real thing. He's like got. He like outwardly sought Putin out for a Russian citizenship and is like friends with Putin.
Yeah, and basically this was a conversation. Putin's like, Roy Jones Jr., I will give you citizenship if you teach me how to box. And he's like, all right.
Yeah, Putin's like, by the way, that is my gold medal now.
Yeah.
Have you seen some of that shit where he just goons people out of shit they own? There's a lot of videos of Putin just gooning people out of the shit they own. Where Putin just like pockets shit and walks away, and you're like, what? What? That's like that's indignant. He did that to some dude's Super Bowl ring, didn't he? I'm pretty sure he did.
Like this. You're a great champion, but I will give you a lifetime supply of women.
No, it's way less. It's way less than that, and way more gangster. I believe, if I remember right, it was a clip. I might be mistaking this, but if I remember right, it was a little clip where he's like, "Let me see the ring." He puts the ring on his finger, and he turns and walks away. And the guy's like, "Hey!" And then you see two bodyguards step in front of the guy, and you're like, "Oh shit! That is the most fucking Michael Corleone shit."
Fucking Bill Belichick of the head coach of the Patriots.
Yeah, it might have been. It was somebody like that. Yeah.
And I think Bill sarcastically is like, "Well, I got 5 more."
What are you gonna do?
I think Bill's like, "Well, I got 5 more, so have that one."
No, but it's hilarious. He's a fucking great. great people. The people in the sport associate with. Anyway, so
Russia, fantastic.
yeah. Anyway, god damn it. Just burn this whole fucking thing to the ground, Pookie. Let's burn this motherfucker down, Pookie.
Burn this motherfucker to the ground.
Oh, that's honestly my favorite scene in all of the Harold and Kumar movies. Is that motherfucker yelling, "Let's burn this motherfucker to the ground."
And also, just your fucking Bush, King of the Forest.
That, Neil Patrick Harris obviously is real good in those too.
Yeah.
Oh, god.
What are you gonna do next, Pete? What are you gonna do next, NPH? Wherever God takes me. Just awkward.
I just love that he's like all about vagina in the weirdest way in those movies where you're like, yo, MPA.
He's just like, I'm just trying to get some poontang. Just like
the
all
funniest
fucking
reading. Yeah.
mollied out.
Yeah. Oh, man. Anyway, let's see. Now that we're just randomly joking about movies, do you have any other can't misses for this week? Only the other one that we're going to talk about in a minute, right?
Yeah, I'd have an honorable mention. I could mention for a sec.
We'll get to that in a second. But I had one other can't miss for this week, and that is Shots Fired, episode 4 from last week. They open up talking obviously a lot about the Chadwick Boseman passing away, and just kind of that whole thing,
nuts.
which was sad, man, but a crazy story, and like, man.
Also, shouts out to that dude's bravery. The fact that he was fighting cancer while filming Black Panther. That's insane.
Well, filming way more than just that. He's been working a ton. Which, like, it was really cool hearing them talk.
Because I remember, too, the internet, someone had shared a post, my social media is a friend of mine. I didn't realize this state. It was... Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay,
I'm choppy.
Sorry,
Yeah.
You're connected. I remember I noticed this, too, and it's like someone...
Oh, now Chris is choppy. Oh, shit. Oh, my God, you guys. I'm just going to burn... Yeah, I got you back. Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep, you're good. Go ahead.
So I was saying, someone shared a post. People were making fun of Boseman for being so skinny, losing all that weight. It's like, dude, you don't even know what's going on. And now we know in hindsight, it's like what he was dealing with, and it's fucking sad, you know.
Yeah. Tough shit. So, yeah, it was there's a lot of reasons why this was a can't miss for me. And a lot of it is shit that, like, I don't even know that I have any right to speak on, which is like, oh, well, we'll get to it over time. But, so a lot of this episode, so again, I should specify, this show is hosted by Mike Morgan, who's a reporter out in the UK, Chisanga, who's a reporter out in the UK, Kairos, and Gina out in New York. I have no idea where Kairos is. Somewhere in the middle of the country, if I remember right. But they're all well, two of them are African Americans. The other two are black people who are, I believe, both at least living in England, and I believe both English. Their accents sure as hell seem to be with Mike and Chisanga. Just for context for what the stuff I'm about to talk about. But they talk about the Dana White speech, the RNC, and his clear calling for not only his support of the police, but calling the protest lawlessness, like, definitively on camera to everybody. And so they talk a lot on this about kind of, if you're a fighter with the UFC, how the fuck do you deal with hearing that shit? Which, like, a lot of we all know a lot of fighters in the UFC don't have shit to say about it, and they're like, fuck yeah, bro. But there's a lot of fighters in the UFC that are not cool with that shit and that have massive, just ideological opposition to it. So it's interesting to hear them kind of talk about that, and that kind of segues well into their first interview they did in that episode, which Gina and Michael interviewed Shayna Dobson after her win 2 weeks ago. Was it 2 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago?
I think it was 3 weeks ago now.
Jesus Christ, time is a weird thing nowadays. It was 3 weeks ago with her giant upset. And if you guys don't know, as we talked about on the episode before that event, Shayna Dobson and G, they don't look identical, but they definitely have some facial characteristics in common, which was hilarious because you got to hear them talk about it and also talk about being black queer females in this within the MMA space. So it's just again, it's a conversation that no one else is having, because how many black queer female MMA hosts do you know in the sport that are also willing to have other women who are outwardly or I'm gonna phrase that weird, so I'm gonna recategorize. I was about to say that, but
You're saying openly gay.
I was gonna say, thank you. I was gonna say outwardly, but that's not the phrase I was looking for. So yes, openly. Thank you. Other openly gay women in the sport, like Macy Chasson or again Shayna. It's really interesting hearing those conversations, because you don't really hear them. Like, you hear them as asked by fucking white dudes, which is like a very different conversation, you know. Because, like, it becomes explaining rather than having a conversation about it a little bit. Like,
yeah, because being gay or queer in, an African American community is a 1,000% different than, say, in a non-minority community, right?
Especially an affluent non-minority community, right? Like, so yeah, I guess it depends on the non-minority community, right? But it's a very interesting conversation we had, and it was really cool hearing, like, first off, Shayna is just cool as hell. Or it's Shanna Dobson. I keep saying Shayna, right? It's because of how it's spelled. I can't fucking...
Well, I just remember that from watching Tough, they said Shayna a million times.
It's Shanna Dobson. I'm 99% positive. It's been 2 weeks since I've heard this, so... but it was just really cool hearing her openly ask Shanna, like, hey, how do you feel about having, like, someone in charge of the company you work for having those kinds of views and, like, saying that shit outwardly in public for the fucking president? And, like, a lot of it, and it was really cool to hear, like, Shanna gives the exact right answer, which, man, this is why these kinds of questions should always be asked by reporters, because Gina asked the question, she's like, listen, I'm not trying to get you in trouble, I'm just like, I want to hear what you think. She's like, honestly, like, yo, I know plenty of people I don't get along with politically, like, we have a business relationship. It's a business relationship. Like, it is what it is. Like, I have very different views. They have very different views. But, like, we can come together as a business relationship and make things happen. So I'm cool with it. It's like, I don't necessarily agree with what they say in other areas. But, hey, we got a working relationship, and I'm cool with that. And it's like, dude, that's, first off, 100% how you ask that question. Because you ask a very hard-hitting, honest question. And then you get a very real-ass response from somebody who's like, dude, honestly, like, it is what it is. Like, I don't agree with it, but, like, also, yeah, like, you can't always agree with the people you're having business deals with, right? Like,
not at all.
And that's why I was like, it's absolutely a can't miss for me just for that, in that, man, that show will always ask the hard questions. They never don't ask the hard questions. And honestly, a lot of times I cringe when I hear it. I'm like, oh shit, Gina just asked that? Like, that blatantly? Like, how do you feel about Dana at the RNC? Or, like, she also asked, like, she's like, so listen, honestly, fighter pay is a real thing, and there's a real disparity between how the bigger name fighters are paid and how the rest of the fighters on the roster are paid. How do you feel about that? And, like, that's not a question you hear reporters asking, really. Like, they'll frame it very carefully, and they'll give the fighter an alleyway to take, right? And it's not as open-ended as a lot of the times Gina will just ask shit like, I just want to see how you feel, yo. Like, it's just a real-ass question, like, and that's why I love this show. The other thing that they bring up, okay, so this was almost going to be our intro clip for this week, but I, as a white male in today's society, have no place using this clip as a relevant piece of audio, because I do not understand. I understand the context. I like to think I understand the context involved, but I am not nearly close enough to the subject to be able to use the clip appropriately. I should have actually written out the quote, because I had to rewrite these notes a couple times to try and phrase this correctly. I'm gonna use it the way I wrote down the notes for the way Michael phrased it. So if I'm misquoting, I apologize. And also, this is not my take. I'm just saying Michael's take, and you'll understand why I'm doing so many caveats right now before I say it. Chris, you'll back me up on this. Well, actually, don't back me up on this, but you'll back me up on why I'm being so cautious about it. So Michael asked the question. So a lot of times in this show, they'll all bring like a hard question to the table. It's kind of the idea of the show, right? They're a panel show. There are a bunch of voices that we don't hear a lot in the sport. They're like, hey, I have a topic. I want to hear your 3 opinion on this topic because I don't know how to feel about it. So Michael brought to the table, he asked the question, is DC, again, for lack of a better phrasing, because I'm sure I'm misquoting, and I'm using fucking air quotes around all of this because it's loosely what he said. But Michael asked the question, is the comparison to DC and the Fighters the same comparison between the House Negro and the Field Negro?
And can you also remind me what show is this from again? Because I hear Michael and there's a lot of Michaels.
Shots Fired, episode 4. So Shots Fired is, of course, Mike Morgan, who also does the show with G called, oh God, why can't I remember the Wocast.
And could you, I don't mean to have you repeat the question. It had something to do with about DC in a comparison to being a House Negro and...
Well, yeah, so he asked the question, is DC's role in the UFC the same... to the fighters, the same role as the House Negro dynamic to the Field Negro, where essentially you're in a position where you're like, hey, I'm getting treated well, so like I don't necessarily see the problem, and everyone around you is not getting treated well, and they're like, we all see the problem. Why are you not speaking up for the rest of us? And
so technically, I would say I can't respond to that because I'm white.
That's why I didn't use the clip, and also you guys realize why I'm caveating the fuck out of this. But dude, it's an interesting conversation that I've never heard brought up. And again, we have no say in any of this. I don't
have any say in it.
I just haven't heard it brought up.
I have no frame of reference in that because I don't have any answers.
I like how we're so fucking afraid to touch it. To be fair, it was a very similar. To be fair to us, it was a very similar response to the show where everybody was like, "I don't know, Mike. That is very aggressive."
All I'll say is I will never be able to acknowledge the point of view from anyone that is, of specifically that's black or of African descent. Obviously, I will never acknowledge that.
I don't think anybody's asking on their behalf.
What I will say is I can understand why someone thinks that way or takes that viewpoint.
Or you can see how it's an interesting comparison from somebody in that.
I will acknowledge that juxtaposition for sure, but I'm still not gonna. I mean, in my opinion, would be on it.
I mean, it's definitely extreme. I think even Mike would say, it's obviously an extreme. Yeah.
It's a little extreme. So,
it's absolutely extreme. But it's an interesting comparison that I've never heard kind of brought up. Yeah. And I literally had to, stop and back up podcast.
All I'll say, in my honest opinion, because I won't, and like I said, I can't speak on any sort of...
No, and I don't think anybody's interested in our opinion on that shit.
Yeah, no, and then that's fair. My opinion on this is I think a person who is black, I would like to hear about that because that's been brought up. That's what my opinion. That's my opinion on that, and that's where it ends.
Well, and that's exactly.
And all I would do is listen. All I would do is listen.
That's exactly why it's can't miss for me. Is because I think it's an interesting conversation that only that show can have. There's not many other shows I know of in the sport that could have that conversation, and also that many shows in the sport that could have that conversation just openly and honestly, and also.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I got you. I don't know if you can hear me, but I got you. I got you. You can keep going. Okay, I'll just keep going until Chris can hear me again, because I know how this shit works. And
I can hear you.
All right, perfect. Well, we're good anyway. But yeah, man, it's just one of those things where it's it's a perfect example of why I love that show. It's because I don't know where else I could hear that conversation just be had out loud. I couldn't name another place. So that's why I love that show. It's because they're doing things nobody else is, and Mike will be the first to say, it was absolutely an intentionally, divisive topic that he brought up because it was a real conversation that was kind of being had, in the background from what I understand. Not necessarily between them, but, just in general. So, I just found it fascinating and worth mentioning. And then lastly, on top of all that, about how everything is great, They also. Oh God, I forgot. He also drops the joke Daniel Cunier, which not acceptable.
It's not good.
It's a very British pun, but not acceptable. But then the other question is he asked why literally the UFC is, or I believe maybe it was Kairos that did, or I can't remember if Kairos or Chisanga, but yeah, the UFC's literally never done anything for Black History Month ever, despite them having black athletes on their roster since Boss Rutan was fighting for fucking titles. Like, that's kind of crazy. Just compared to every other sports league. And then last,
I'll say this: if you're looking worse than Roger Goodell, you know you're fucking up.
Dude, right? Like, just
even at least the NFL now is having. I
anything.
watched the Chiefs and Texans game yesterday, and what I thought was fantastic. And
you mean how America booed the fucking Americans?
That is embarrassing.
We're the fucking dumbest country on the
planet. That
planet.
they're in Kansas City, Missouri, which is in the Midwest, and they're all a bunch of fat white people anyway
Dude.
that don't care about minorities.
No.
Anyways, my point is, what I thought was great is how they let the players share their statements on the back of their helmets. Like I saw players in the Chiefs, Breonna Taylor, or Trayvon Martin.
No, that was very cool. And Chris, I would like to ask you, has there ever been a country that's more an example of Frank Camacho's presidency than this one that we currently live in, where we're literally fucking Dak Shepard booing Americans, a moment of silence for our own people? Like, that is the most fucking idiocracy shit of all time. Be like, oh, you want silence from me? Bull!
Yeah, he's like this. I'm your lawyer, but he also fucking interrupted me while watching All My Balls. That is not okay.
Exactly.
It's like someone's helping you, but then they're also like, well, fuck you too. It's like, well,
I'm very excited for the Carl's Jr. Go Fuck Yourself ads that are coming out next year.
Yeah, Carl Jr. Fuck you. I'm eating.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, your children now in the custody of Charles Carl. It's just like, you go to Costco.
It's getting really
Costco.
real.
I love you. Yeah, I got my law degree from Costco.
Dude, that show holds up so well. That was the first thing
I'm
I watched
to watch
at the
that
beginning.
again. I think that movie's still on HBO.
Dude, I watched it at the beginning of the pandemic, and it holds up so much better than it did a year ago, and it held up so well a year ago.
I never heard no plant outgrow no toilet. Yeah, you sure you're not the smartest guy in the world?
Dude,
it's just like
it's the saddest moment when you realize halfway through that movie, President Camacho's the smarter of the presidents we've had. Like, that's a real thing. Oh boy, he has like some actual logic and understanding, and he doesn't just like put his head in the ground. It's great. It's a crazy thing. Anyway, lastly on that episode, they did mention the other thing is I didn't even bring up Chisanga had an interview with GSP that's like 25 minutes long, like a long ass form interview with GSP. Where he talks about Khabib versus Gaethje. He talks about how he's been training during the pandemic. He talks about how he favors Khabib in that fight. He says that with a win over Gaethje, Khabib solidifies GOAT status. He also says the GOAT discussions are essentially...
He's honey dicking everyone.
No. He says GOAT discussions...
I'm fucking with you. That's just
No. He says pretty clearly... He's like, I don't think I'm coming back. I'm not really interested in it. He also says GOAT discussions are essentially like talking about Batman versus Superman and how it's worthless. Which is very GSP, right? Of course. And then he also talks
about dinosaurs and aliens.
Exactly. And then he also talks about his Hall of Fame induction. It's just a fucking excellent episode. And I can't recommend it highly enough, man. It's really good. Both Heavy Hands 332 and Shots Fired episode 4 are, they're both excellent for very different reasons. But the reason why they're so good is because no one else is doing that kind of content yet. And I guarantee you people will over time because people are going to figure out how well that shit works and how smart it is. But man, are they ahead of their time. Still, both of them to this day. So, big fucking ups to both of them. And I can't recommend it highly enough. Next up, we do have a new show. Chris, you listen to this as well, right?
Yeah, while I'm still awake. This is a really good one.
Dude, how good. So... I tweeted this out this week, but Broadened Horizon, which is the new show on...
I thought it was a typo, and I was like, oh, wait, it's Ryzen.
Yeah, it's very clever. I would argue it's as good as our naming scheme is on our podcast, in that there's layers to that shit like an onion. You know what I mean? It's a
Like an
Shrek
onion,
joke.
donkey.
Yeah, it's a fucking Shrek joke of a podcast name. But I first off, yeah, exactly. Oh God, yeah. All right, Stern, just calm down over there. So Drake Riggs, who I've been a fan of for a while, he's done a couple podcasts. I mean, of course, you guys, we mentioned him on this show a bunch between episodes with like Jake Smith and dudes like that, or I mean, a bunch of podcasts he's been on with the Loudmouth MMA guys. But I believe it's My MMA News as well as in like combination with the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network. He has a new show called Broadened Horizon, Horizin. This was episode 1, and it's him with Shingo, the kind of the English translator for Ryzen, who is the co-host. And Chris, the best way I can describe this is essentially it's like a documentary style, like modern documentary style, right?
Yeah.
Where since everyone he's interviewing is from Ryzen, especially in this episode, it's Kai Asakura, Megumi Fuji, Naoki Inoue, and Ayaka Hamasaki. Yeah. And so what they do is they do that classic. I mean, it's the right way to do these kinds of interviews where you let the person speak in Japanese for a beat and a half, and then you start the translation over the top of the Japanese that's potted down, so you can hear the Japanese underneath with their actual voice, but then you hear Shingo's translation over the top of it, to where it rather than that episode taking twice as long, it's like a real-time conversation almost. And that is such a crucial difference, because the amount of time that episode would have taken if they wouldn't have done it if they would have played out, like, for example, Megumi Fuji's explanation in Japanese, then Shingo's explanation in English of what she said, then had Drake's answer, then had Megumi respond, then had Shingo respond. It extends the length of that episode a crazy amount, and also it kind of hurts the pace of the conversation, right? And I would argue this is and I would argue like as a day one episode, this is one of the best executed ones I've probably come across. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a day one episode,
this is their first one, so
I mean, I couldn't tell it was the first one.
It felt like it's been happening for a while, right? Like it's really it's paced really tightly. The interviews are great. Like it seems like it could have been a show that's been around for 6 months, right?
I agree, and they were very well prepared. Drake Riggs did a great job formatting everything. He gave respect to the translator, to the guests that was answering questions. There was never really a moment in that episode where I was. It was just seamless, really. I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed some bits about it. I think it was, what did I say? Megumi Fuji. She was like, at one point, she was like, what do you like doing? She's like, I enjoy going to the beach. I like hiking in the mountains. I like oysters, and I like Japanese pancakes and drinking booze. I'm like, that's a real one.
Dude, Megumi Fuji's the coolest. That was one of the like her interviews are always cool, but that was a great interview with her. Yeah. Like Megumi
Japanese pancakes. I'm like, fuck. Let me Google that shit.
You probably don't know much about Megumi Fuji, do you?
No, when
like,
I said she's
name,
mentioned
right?
in the likes of Cyborg and the Goats, I remember I've heard her name.
Yeah, I mean
but I don't really think I've seen
name drop her for a ton. Well, you may have to. You know what? We should do a Megumi Fuji retrospective one of these days. I think that'd be fun. Yeah, you'd be surprised how many people she fought, and just a wild size, and like just all the. Her career is pretty crazy and a lot of fun. I think you would. I think you'd enjoy it, man. We may have to do that one of these days, because I'm a big Megumi. I've always been a big Megumi Fuji fan. I mean, ever since when I first started getting into the sport and all the old. I mean, shit, you can't even be around the sport without Josh Barnett scolding you for not liking Megumi Fuji enough. So, I fucking love it. But yeah, man, it's just a really good episode, and I'm very excited for that show. Like, Drake's always been not only very on top of the Japanese scene, but also very on top of the women's MMA scene, just over time. Like, he's done shows in the past. I believe he had the WMMA Today show back in the day that I think is, like, still semi-ongoing. as well. And so I always love the stuff he's been putting out, and this was an incredible episode. That, man, for this to be your first episode and for it to be this well paced and this well produced and just like right out the gate, this kind of lineup, like, holy shit, dude. So yeah, Broadened Horizon, Horizin, really fucking good.
Japanese pancakes look pretty fire. It's almost like Mexican flan, but like stacked. I don't know how to describe it. It looks like it's like a hybrid of Mexican flan with American pancakes.
You saying it's flan on flan on flan?
Yeah, pretty much, with maple syrup and blueberries and chocolate and all that.
Sounds fucking. That sounds like
it's shaped like flan with the consistency of like American I don't know.
It's
or
like a fruited dulce de leche almost.
Just Google search Japanese pancakes. You're like, I want some. That's all you're gonna say when you see.
Hey, you know what that happens with most Japanese food, from what I've found. Anyway.
To be fair, yeah.
Well, on that note, do you have any honorable mentions before we get out of here?
Yeah, I'll just say real quick. This new podcast is called Keep Your Hands Up. I can't remember their names. It was only a 25-minute podcast, but they recapped the Overeem versus Sakai. They talked about Overeem's impressive ground and pound, even though they thought he lost the majority of those rounds.
Yeah.
Against Augusto Sakai. They
Unlike
talked
Derek
about
Lewis, who kept giving it fucking...
Yeah, they mentioned Derek Lewis. They talked about Francis Ngannou having tunnel vision as far as he zeroed in on that title shot. Like, at this point, does he really just wait for the Stipe, whoever he fights, or whatever the fuck? Like, at this point, he kind of has to, because it's like, not like he's going to fight someone. They're confident he'll beat whoever he fights before Stipe, regardless. But, so, it's interesting. Well, I don't know, they didn't mention Jon Jones, though. But the whole Jon Jones thing is interesting. I am convinced he is a heavyweight, but I think Jon Jones, in my opinion, if you ask me right now, who will Jon Jones fight? I think he'll fight like Curtis Blades or some shit like that.
He's waiting to see if Brock Lesnar is going to fight, and then when Brock Lesnar doesn't fight, I bet he fights for the UFC or for the 205 title again for whoever just won.
Really?
That would be my guess, because I think he got baited into moving up for Brock, and I think Brock's going to fucking clown him, and I think that's going to be the end of Jon Jones.
I think either way, it could entertain Jon Jones if he fights like a Curtis Blades.
I mean, to be fair, he might have looked at Stipe.
If he can get the Stipe shot, he'll do it.
He might have looked at Stipe in that last fight and been like, meh.
If I'm honest, could Jon Jones beat Stipe? Probably, from a skill set standpoint.
I mean, I favor light heavyweights over heavyweights almost always.
Yeah, but also, like, if Stipe won, I'd also be like, well, I'm not surprised either, because it's Stipe, and the dude knows how to adjust, so it's kind of like... Yeah. And I saw what he did to DC the third time around. It's kind of more of a one-sided beating before. Yeah. Well, and any of the fights, really. It was just kind of like, well, I know what DC's going to do. He's going to try to wrestle me in the first round, and then once he tires out, I'm going to beat him up on the feet, and that's kind of what happened. So,
sure. Anyway, on Keep Your Hands Up, do you have anything else on that?
What's up?
On Keep Your Hands Up, do you have anything else on that?
It was solid. It was kind of more personal. They talked about each other's personal lives, but it was probably about a 25-30 minute thing. But they had some good thoughts, some good. It's mostly heavyweight talk. But I'll check these guys out again for sure.
Hell yeah!
Because I think they were kind of on a time crunch. So
a lot of results come back before.
I'm only saying this because he would have signed with Bellator at this point. Because usually it was like a 3-week honey dicking and then he signs. But
let's go ahead and wait for those USADA results first before we get to it.
Touche.
Because we all saw him showing up and getting tested, and we'll see how that goes. Co-main event Power Hour also from CME podcast.
By the way, don't mean to interrupt, but if he does go to UFC, please fight Dan Hooker. His first fight, that'd be fun.
Oh, that'd be great. Right. Yeah, that's the one. I agree. That's totally the fight to start with. That's absolutely the one. The co-main event Power Hour for September 11th, 2020 is a lot about the anniversary of the IFC 18 tournament, which had like dudes like Forrest Griffin and Jeremy Horn, and it was like backwoods as fuck. It's a really cool story. They also talk about how bad everyone would be making fun of Bellator if they were putting on cards like the UFC is right now. But since it's the UFC, everybody's like, meh, it's the UFC.
Yeah.
Pandemic, yo. Even though Bellator's putting on way better cards this weekend, which nobody's talking about. which is interesting. Also, they talk about how Dana blamed the NBA and the NFL for letting positive people play, even though that's not at all confirmed. And then Dana immediately is like, "Oh, but I'm shaking hands with everybody. I'll shake hands with everybody till I die." You're like, "All right, bro, fucking great look." Oh my god, this sport sucks. The Fight Site, the interview episode of their podcast for August 31st, 2020. You guys heard us talk about this 2 fucking weeks ago when Phil was in chat when he dropped in. He interviewed Cedric Doumbé. I almost fucking butchered. I almost tried to say Cedric, and I was like, I'm not going to go that fucking European.
Cedric the Entertainer.
No,
clearly.
yeah. But Cedric Doumbé, he had the interview about kind of what his current workout schedule is, about how he's doing 2-a-days, and now he trained at AKA last summer, and he's looking at moving to MMA here shortly and having his first MMA fight. And I've talked about this in the past, and I don't want to suck Phil's dick too much on this thing because you all know I'm a big Phil fan, but I really like Phil's interviews because he will go really technical in his questions about like style matchups and fight questions, and it seems like it almost always catches interviewers off guard, where they're like, "Oh shit, you not only watch that fight, you actually have like very technical questions about that fight." So that's oh shit, I have to actually think about this and actually have to answer some technique questions that aren't just like, "Yo, what are you working on, bro?" And I fucking love it. It seems like he always catches people off guard, but it's one of my favorite parts about it. And then also the other coolest shit thing is Phil recommends a bunch of fights that he's like, "Yo, since you're moving over to MMA, I'd love to see you watch." Like, he's like, "I think you would love fights like Mendez versus Aldo 2, which is of course one of Phil's favorite fights and just a great fucking fight in general, especially if you're looking for like an elite striker with elite takedown defense against a high level wrestler," which Cedric said was like some of his favorite fights are striker versus grappler matchups. So it's really cool to hear Phil like be like, "Yo, you should definitely check this fight out." He's like, you can hear it. He's like, "Oh, all right, that's on my list, bro." Like, that's cool. And then also it's interesting to hear in this episode, Cedric mentioned the fight contracts in Glory are not fight based. It sounds like. Again, this is 100% speculation. But so Phil asked him how many fights you have left in your Glory contract. He's like, it doesn't really work like that. It's more like time based. So he says, I believe, I know it's October. I think it's October 2021 is what he said, but don't quote me on that. If you go back and listen to the interview from the Fight Site, if you want to get the exact number, but I believe it's October 2021, and he expects to get about 3 more fights in before then, and then he wants to move over to MMA. So, hey y'all, watch the fuck out if you're not trying to get boxed up by Cedric Doumbé with the quickness. So, man, the other thing that I really thought was interesting is Phil talking to him about kickboxers' ability to flow through combos a little bit more seamlessly than MMA fighters, which is like, of course, partially a construct of them having to fight off takedowns more and like be more reactionary. But it was really interesting to hear him talk about like, "Oh yeah, well you can see you flow through like 6-punch combos, whereas MMA fighters will go for about a 3-punch combo and then kind of, or like even if you're just like a dude working a bag, you go through a couple combos, you're like, I'm out of ideas." And you look at Cedric Doumbé throwing fucking 14-punch or 14-punch/kick combos on a bag, and you're like, holy shit. So yeah,
By the way, now that I'm actually not as half asleep, I do remember I actually did watch on a whim because I'm subscribed to the Fight Sites channel. I did watch the interview with Frederic Doumbé because it was like 2 French guys, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that's right, I watched that." I'm
great,
fucking
right?
dumb. Yeah, it was very good.
Yeah.
Sorry, it just took me a while to recognize what the fuck that was from. I was like, "Oh yeah, that's
funny.
why I recognize that." I'm
Yeah,
so
yeah.
dumb.
I think I sent it to you after Phil dropped in chat the last time. Yeah, Phil's a great interviewer, right?
Oh, he's great.
Like Phil. One of the things I really like about Phil is you can tell how genuinely excited he is about doing it. Like, he's just excited to be talking to these dudes about this cool shit and like about all the fights and stuff. And yeah, man, it's palpable. I fucks with it. Also, Phil's fucking with my Gasper No references I'm dropping in on Twitter about how Gina. Do you see that shit? How Gina Carano is fucking mask denier and the worst.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
And then, of course, I have to tweet out the fucking time ruins everything Gaspernell irreversible gif. And I believe there was probably 2 people on Twitter who got it, and I believe it was Phil and Dan Tom. And I think Dan Tom's still avoiding that movie for good reason. But yeah, by the way, I would say go watch Irreversible, but maybe unless you have a real strong sensibilities, maybe don't go watch Irreversible. It's a dark, sad thing. But goddamn it, is it good. MMA on the Rocks, episode 207. Serena De Jesus guested with Bill Welker. It's a really good episode. She talks a lot about how Roxy's fighting. She talks about what she has coming up next.
My cousin.
Yeah, that's right. Since Roxy's fighting KGB Lee this weekend, which, man, that fight's been the longest time in the making. That was inevitable. I think they fought, actually, way back in the day, if I remember right. Right? Roxanne Modafferi. I want to say they fought in Invicta,
I'll just say this.
Third fight.
My cousin is an Italian that's not a Nazi sympathizer. I'm just kidding. I just had to say that.
No, she really isn't, though.
She's not.
No, she's friends with Serena De Jesus. Serena De Jesus would not play that shit. Let's see. I could have sworn she had a win over KGB Lee forever ago. Maybe not. Oh yeah, she does. In Invicta, at Invicta 10, a split decision win. That's a very different Roxanne Modafferi and a very different KGB Lee. So I think that's gonna be a fun fight, actually. But it was cool hearing that. And it sounds like Serena De Jesus might. This is 100% rumor and speculation on my part. Sounds like she might be fighting at drive-in at the fair in Miami on September 24th. I'm not positive, but it sounds like that might be the thing. Or maybe it's October 24th. One of those. It sounds like that's where she's fighting, which I don't know. That sounds like a crazy thing, but yeah, good episode. The Hammer MMA episode 614 from last week. Nope, sorry, 514 from last week is really solid. They question why Jan Kutalaba, or they question why OSP is fighting 2 weeks after testing positive when Jan Kutalaba tested positive 2 weeks before his fight and then tested positive again right before his fight, which that's fair. Also, they used the phrase OSPPE during that episode, which Chris, I don't know if you've heard the phrase OSPPE before, but that's a good joke right there.
Don't think I've heard that one.
Yeah, they because of course OSP got the COVID and then recovered. So they started calling it OSPPE during that episode, which is fucking really good. A Fighter's Chance episode 16 was very solid. This was Will Brooke guested. Interesting hearing Will Brooks talking about kind of his struggle right now being, of course, with PFL not putting on shows and everything. And looking for, I believe he said he's looking for fights, but he's training with Lima Brothers and loving to cook and all that, which is cool. 6th round retro for Super Brawl 41 was really, really good. If this episode would have happened last week, this would have been close to a catch for me. It's just a really fun retro podcast for an old Hawaii Super Brawl card that is wild as shit and with a lot of big names on it, so definitely go check it out. I think it's Hawaii. Severe MMA episode 277 was really, really solid as well. That was a great episode. Also, Shawnee podcast has some really good jokes in that one. Man, it's a good one. Verbal Tap MMA episode 424 was really solid. Believe You Me episode 252 with Alexander Rakic talking about his Serbian wedding, and with Michelle Watterson talking about her fight with Angie Hill and getting her SAG card from the celery scene in MacGruber. Did you know that? What? Michelle Watterson got her SAG. You know what a SAG card is?
Yeah, Screen Actors Guild.
Yeah, so she got her SAG card by being an extra in the celery scene of MacGruber.
Dude, I haven't seen the movie in a long time.
The one where he puts celery up his ass and walks around?
Oh, fuck. Okay.
That's the scene she got her Screen Actors Guild card for.
That's pretty funny.
Which is super goofy. And then the Writer and the Fighter episode 76 is really fun. A lot of football talk if you guys are into that. And then they talk a lot about Strikeforce and how bad they want a Strikeforce documentary, which would be dope as hell. And then lastly, UFC Unfiltered for September 9th. Jimmy and Matt were both in studio, and there's interviews with Angie Hill and Michelle Watterson. Yeah, it was great.
Nice.
Cool, man. Let's see. Do you have anything you wanted to mention that is not MMA related before we get out of here?
Yeah. Since I'm such a big baseball nerd, if you play MLB The Show, they just did finally their Player of the Month program, and the best thing, and this is why Sonny San Diego shits on every other sports, video game production company, right?
I mean,
because a lot of their
they
content's
shit on
free.
EA. It's just EA. It's the only
Yeah,
other one.
it's just so they have Topps now, which is like Topps baseball cards,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
they basically have moments you do for free. It's really not that hard, and you get free badass players.
That's
The
dope.
Player of the Month card now is, it's been great. You even get like some of your favorite players from your teams, depending on how your
Are they
team's doing.
permanent, or are they semi-permanent?
They're permanent, and my favorite team, my
Shit,
San
dude,
Diego
this is
Padres.
like all the cool shit that EA sucks about.
That's
You're
the thing, 'cause
100% right.
I used to be one of those Madden shills with Ultimate Team, and I'd be like, oh
It
yeah,
sucks.
I only
Everything's-
need this, and I'll spend a couple of
Everything's
dollars.
time
No.
limited and everything's expensive.
I'll say this.
And yeah, it sucks.
The
Pay to
Padres
win
this year
bullshit.
have been are the number one offense in the league, believe it or not. So there are a lot of tops now for Padres players, and the Player of the Month this month is Fernando Tatis Jr.
I was gonna ask,
for the Padres. He's a 99 overall, and he's like an end game card. He's up there with Mike Trout, and
Yeah.
it's like, holy fuck. What I was doing earlier,
Mount
it's
Smashmore,
what I do
right?
is when I listen to podcasts and I have to listen to podcasts to catch up, I play the show because it's easy because you're playing a baseball game. And I'm still listening to podcasts because like you
I
just
play
have to put
2K
yourself
for
low volume.
I play 2K
You know.
for the same reason. Yeah.
But yeah, I've almost got Tatis Jr. and I need him on my team, and it's just so fun. It's just so fun that the Padres are one of the best teams in the league. It's crazy, and it just goes to show. It's like, well,
it
this
goes
is
to what,
happens.
Chris?
What's up?
It goes to what?
It goes to show.
Bro!
Knee slapper. It goes to show that's what happens when you have an ownership group that's like, well, there's no salary cap in baseball, so what is it that we need to get good players? What is that called? Oh yeah, money. Yeah, let's just do that. right?
Yeah. Well, luckily we
So
never,
for the first time
Yeah.
in life, the Padres spend money, and it's like, oh wait, we're good now.
Weird.
How does that work? And we have a
Yeah.
good farm. Yeah, so go figure. So the Dodgers are kind of getting scared, and it's great because fuck the Dodgers. So
Also, it's because all the rich white dudes that used to put their money into Chargers football now put their money into baseball. So
that's big brain thinking right there.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
fuck
Shouts
the
out to
Chargers.
white dudes in
Always
San
do that.
Diego.
Fuck Dean Spanos. Yeah. So, I know the NFL's back, and I got suckered into playing fantasy football, but it was for under $100, so I'm not really waging that much. But my point is, my strategy for fantasy football is I didn't have a strategy because it's COVID, and everyone's going to get sick, so it's all good because they're not in a bubble.
Yeah, your strategy is flip coins and pray for the not sick.
Yeah, if anyone has the only two sports with real, big brains behind it are the NHL and the NBA. So
Yeah,
good luck.
and even then, man, we'll see how long
Well,
that goes for.
Even then, and this is impressive to me, a player for the Houston Rockets got kicked out of the bubble. He just got kicked off the team, basically. They said, go fuck yourself for the rest of the season because he convinced a COVID-19 tester to just say, hey, come back to my hotel. And she's like, all right. And I was like, you know what? I would say that's impressive because she's a COVID-19 tester.
Oh my god, how are we not
That's-
seeing more of that in
But
MMA
he's
yet?
also an NBA player, so she's probably just like, well, fuck it. So, and clearly that was his intention too. So, good on him. I won't say his name, not that it matters.
Yo,
but,
here's my question: is how long until that happens in MMA? And also, we'll never find out.
Oh, it's probably already happened, and we just don't.
Oh, 100%. This
What?
probably happens every weekend. And that's why there's fights
Paulo
falling off.
Costa has probably already done it to multiple. Never mind.
Dudes.
He's like, I'm Ricky Martin, except I'm not gay.
I love that MMA Twitter is so triggered by Paulo and fucking Izzy. They are so scared of gay dudes that they're like, oh my god, there are metros in this world. Oh, it's the best.
I wear lipstick. I'm not gay. I'm Ricky Martin, but I'm not gay. I'm the straight Ricky Martin.
I've seen pink hair on only one type of man. It's the dumbest shit. Anyway, a perfect segue. So some of my well-rounded.
He's living La Vida USADA, clearly.
Yeah. Well, he's living some kind of Vita. Anyway, my this is a great segue into my chaos of well-rounded shows. Doug Stanhope today, when we recorded this, did a 9/11 happy hour on Patreon. He did a Zoom call where everyone could just jump on and talk shit and drink and say what's up, and it was great. I highly recommend it. It was a lot of fun. It was actually I know what you're thinking, and it wasn't that. It was very calm and like cordial and fucking sweet. It was a nice time. Speaking of which, Sam Talent has recently been staying at Doug Stanhope's podcast. I know Sam Talent from fucking 2010 when he was on Marijuana Radio back in the day out in Denver. And just recently, his book, Running the Light, has blown the fuck up. You guys have probably heard comedians talking about it. Anybody from Stanhope to, Jesus, fucking Bill Burr. I believe Burke Chrysler talked about it. A ton of people have talked about it. It's an incredible book. Actually, I don't think I have it in the room right here. I think it's in the other room. But, yeah, no, it's an incredible fucking book. Running the Light by Sam Talent with 2 L's. It's fucking great. It's a fictional story about a comedian, but it's basically a real story about what comedians are. And he, like, name drops stories that are not one-to-one stories about other comedians, but they're hearsay stories about comedians that, like, clearly tie in. And, like, Andy Andrus is one of them in the first, like, 20 or 30 pages, and Andy Andrus is, like, literally referencing himself in some jokes about that book. It's great. So, highly recommend that. And also, Church of What's Happening Now, episodes 817. That is the very last episode of the Church of What's Happening Now. It's called Goodbye for Now. Joey Diaz and Lisa Ayat say goodbye to everybody. They're very sweet about it. And then at the end, Joey Diaz releases the Pauly Shore episode that Pauly Shore told me he's not allowed to release, where Joey got him way too high. So if you want to hear Pauly Shore super fucking high and uncomfortable on a podcast, that is the one, and it's very funny. Also, Pod Gods, PODGODZ, episode 354. That show is the reason why this show exists. I've always been very clear about that. Gio, the guy who runs it, Superfan Giovanni of the Adam Carolla Show fame. Yeah, that sounds different nowadays with Adam Carolla trending the way he is and talking on Twitter the way he is. But yeah, I don't know. Listen to this show, and you'll see why me and Gio are good friends and why I love that dude to death. But he has a show with Lax Dude, who, it's essentially it's a podcast about podcasts. That's why we have a show, is because he did that show, and I was like, I want to do something like that for MMA, but no one else will ever do this show if I don't. So, absolutely go watch or go listen to Pod Gods episode 354. It is a lot of like life talk and then some podcast talk, a lot of which is just Giovanni being disenfranchised in the way podcasts in general sound right now, and just like how everybody's kind of putting out trash content, which I feel like we can kind of go ahead and double down on in the MMA space, especially right now as well. The Burke cast, episode 429 with Shane Gillis, is really good. Shane Gillis, this is the day after Shane Gillis and Ari Shaffir dosed Big J. Okerson on the Legion of Skanks podcast with acid. To be fair, I think I talked about this on the last show we did, but to be fair, this was during the presidential election for the Legion of Skanks that they did, and Luis J. Gomez, Chris, have I told you this? Luis J. Gomez tried to dose Ari to get back for Burke Reicher.
No, but that sounds very believable.
So you know how Ari dosed Burke Kreischer back in the day.
Oh no, I remember that.
Yeah. So Luis J. Gomez during the Legion of, so Ari's whole platform on the Legion of Skanks podcast, which by the way is a podcast for it's a podcast for offensiveness. I understand if you're offended by it, and you're probably right to feel that way. It's not. You should have some feelings about it. But Luis J. Gomez tried to get back at Ari by dosing him in honor of Burke Chrysler. However, Ari found out and then dosed the other co-host of the podcast, Big J, who's never done acid. And they dosed him live on the air, and you can see it happen.
Oh, great.
It's one of the greatest moments in all of podcasting history. It's a fucked up moment, and man, it's fucked up, but it's really funny. But on top of that, Shane Gillis was also there. I don't know how we got to this. Oh, right. So the Burke Chrysler podcast is the day after that happened, and Shane Gillis was the one involved with Ari and dosing Jay. So there's a lot of talk about that with Burke Chrysler about the dosing, which is a lot of fun. And then lastly, our friend Jana taught me this weekend, or this last weekend. I ended up seeing her, and she taught me about deviated septums, and it's changed my motherfucking life. So I obviously, as you guys can hear, hearing me talk, had a deviated septum my entire life. I thought it was from bad nose break. Not from bad nose break. Turns out, according to her, which she started out as a dental hygienist. Now she's, I think, the main, assistant in the dentist's office that she works at. And it's, specifically for someone who specializes in this type of stuff. Essentially, deviated septums are caused by narrow palates. So the two things that she recommended to me was to use a breathe right strip at night. And if you won't stick to your nose, you put some alcohol on it, like some vodka or something, dry off the oils, and then you stick it on. And then you use Flonase. And it has completely changed the way I'm able to sleep. I no longer have the crazy acid reflux I used to have, just from, which I didn't realize, but I thought it was from my drinking and shitty eating. Nope, 100% from my terrible deviated septum. Also, deviated septums aren't your nose. It's way up in your head that it actually happens. And so it completely changed my life in the last week. So I cannot recommend it highly enough. If you have the deviated septum, if nothing else, go buy yourself for $30 a thing of Flonase and a thing of breathe right strips and give it 2 or 3 weeks and let me know how you feel. Because I'm a weekend and I feel way fucking better every single morning. So kind of blew my goddamn mind, and I know a lot of people I know have deviated septums, so I thought I'd throw it out here as well. But yeah, man.
Nice. That's awesome.
Well, that's what I got. It's been a crazy episode. It is all podcasts all the time. Angie Hill all day tomorrow. I have no other takes on any other fights because I don't believe any of them are going to happen.
Go my cousin and go Angie.
Oh, that's right. Go your cousin, except I think KGB Lee might take that one. But I would like to see Roxy win it.
I mean, yeah, if I'm honest, I'd probably pick her in that fight.
I think her clinch game is going to be tough for Roxy to get through.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest.
I think Roxy's going to end up in the clinch and getting chewed up with knees and kind of having not enough takedown answers or hands to kind of slow her down. But either way, should be a fun one.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, on that note, we are going to close this motherfucker out. But as always, you guys can find us on Twitter, TSOV Pod. That's where we be blabbering, mostly me. Chris jumps on there once in a while. And then in the meantime, you guys can always find the show notes for any of the podcasts we talk about at thesoundofviolence.com. If you look in the link in the description, there should be a link to our website if you don't have the full show notes in your app. You can always go there, and we have links to every single thing we talk about. And Chris, anything else you want to plug before we get out of here?
I think that's it.
Perfect. Well, before I die of a heat stroke, I'm going to go drink some delicious Society beers. And we love y'all. We can't wait to see you next week when hopefully we'll be back with a little bit of a more real-ass fight card.
Yep.
All right. Well, until next time, everybody, go do something decadent. We out. Lay.
Liked by the sound of violence.
effort.